Hi, I'm Steve Lennox, president at Kingswood University in Sussex, New Brunswick, Canada. Kingswood is a fully accredited university, but we're a particular kind of university. We're a Bible college. And what that means is that we prepare people for ministry. Now, this could be ministry as a vocation. Think of a pastor. Or it could be to prepare you for ministry through your vocation. Maybe you're planning to be a teacher or a nurse or a physician or a lawyer or a business person. But you understand that a good solid foundation in the faith is what you need in order to do your vocation as a ministry. Enter Kingswood. We're here to prepare you for what matters most. And what matters most is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so whether it's to prepare you to be a preacher, to bring the gospel from pulpits or youth groups or Christian schools or as a missionary, or whether it's to bring the gospel through your vocation, in the classroom, in the courtroom, in the business, Kingswood can help you prepare for what matters most. If you're interested, contact me, president@kingswood.edu, or check us out on our website, kingswood.edu.
Hey Parkway Church, it's Friday night. Welcome to the Believe online conference. We're glad that you're tuning in tonight. Let your friends know, let your neighbors know as the weekend progresses here. Every evening at 7 p.m. There will be somebody sharing. We keep the sessions within the hour, and we're so glad that you're here tonight. You're in for a treat. Dr. Stephen Lennox, he is the president of Kingswood University. He is an author. He's been on archaeological digs in the Holy Land. An incredible guy that'll be sharing with us tonight. And this conference dedicated to answering questions that skeptics might have about faith, about Jesus, about belief. We're really glad that you're here. The conference, the weekend, it is all entirely free. If you were tuning in and you still haven't sort of registered online, we would love if you would do that. Let us know that you were part of things this weekend. And myparkwaychurch.ca, go to our website, click on news and events, go to the Believe Online Conference, take you 30 seconds. We'll enter your name in for draws happening through the weekend for some reading material from our speaker tomorrow night on Saturday night. Mark Clark has written a book, The Problem of God. We want to pass that on to you as a prize, so make sure you do that. Be engaged that way. The weekend is entirely free. There was some cost to kind of pulling it off, obviously, and getting it together. We are not sort of taking an offering. Everything's entirely free, but we do have a project we would love you to be a part of as you feel to. It is Project Solid Start. It is a World Hope Canada project happening in the country of Bosnia, helping an early educator get kids ready for grade 1. It is a beautiful thing to be part of. It's a great thing that they're doing in the country. And I know Greater Kingston area, this is a military town. Canadian National Forces, had a mission to Bosnia years ago. This is a really great project that as a church, as Parkway Church, we are partnering with to give towards. We have a goal of hitting $4,000 by Christmas. So we have started the ball rolling, and we have given $2,000 towards that project. We'd love to see if we can meet our goal of $4,000 by then. If you'd like to give, same thing, myparkwaychurch.ca. Click on giving, go to World Hope Canada, and there'll be some links there where you can do that, and we'll try to meet our goal. Thank you so much. No obligation at all to do that, but if you'd like to, we would really appreciate it. God bless you tonight. Join in and take some notes. So glad that you're part of the conference.
We hear a lot about faith these days, especially now that we get closer to Christmas with all the Hallmark movies. But sometimes reference to faith is made, and it's critical, harshly critical of those who believe, particularly of Christians, for believing. That's what I want to talk about today. Myths about faith. I call them myths rather than misunderstandings because misunderstandings go away when there's clarification, but these are persistent. They just keep hanging on even after they've been explained. I also call them myths because they're so influential. They get into our minds and they shape our thinking in powerful ways. And I call them myths because they're so commonly accepted. People believe them without even checking them to see if they're true. The 4 myths that I want to talk about, here's the first. that faith and science are at war with one another. You hear that warfare language, but the interesting thing is when you check around, you don't smell any gunpowder. You don't see any evidence of battle. In fact, these two elements, faith and science, exist pretty much separate from one another. And where they do overlap, there's minimal contradiction, as long as there's proper understanding. You might even say that there's a maternal relationship between faith and science. If you go back to the opening chapters of Genesis, the Judeo-Christian tradition begins with this understanding of creation that sees God bring things into creation and then step back to let creation be self-perpetuating. You read it, and several times the writer of Genesis will talk about things being created to reproduce after their kind. What's God doing? He's creating the laws of nature and giving us access to exploring those laws of nature. Apples appear on a tree, not because God puts them there each time, but because the tree is created to produce apples, and that produces the possibility of science. Many have pointed out that the modern understanding of science began when scientists, many of whom were committed Christians, recognized with an orderly, rational God, an orderly, rational creation, and set about uncovering those laws. Well, you may not like the maternal influence, but there's certainly a fraternal relationship between science and faith. That's the language of John Polkinghorne, an honored professor of physics for many years at Cambridge University. He spoke of a fruitful interaction rather than mutual friction. Polkinghorne cites Einstein, who put it this way: religion without science is blind. Science without religion is lame. Polkinghorne changed it to read this way: religion without science is confined. It fails to be completely open to reality. Science without religion, he said, is incomplete. It fails to attain the deepest possible understanding. So both are necessary. Religion, for example, influences how scientific discoveries are used. Religion is, if you will, the conscience of science, reminding scientists how to put their discoveries to best use and challenging some uses of science. Science, on the other hand, for example, helps us better understand the Bible. Think of the difference between a geocentric understanding of the universe and a heliocentric understanding. It was Nicholas Copernicus who pointed out that the sun did not revolve around the earth, but the earth around the sun. And that helped to clarify certain passages of Scripture so that we understand when the sun stands still in Joshua, that that's to be understood metaphorically and not literally. So religion helps science and science helps religion. I like the way Francis Collins put it. Francis Collins is the head of the United States National Institute of Health and the former head of the Human Genome Project. Here's what he had to say: one of the strongest motivations of humankind is to seek answers to profound questions. And we need to bring all the power of both the scientific and spiritual perspectives to bear on understanding what is both seen and unseen. Science and religion are not at war. They work together well, like brothers. This is why you have so many Christian scientists, people like John Polkinghorne and Francis Collins, people like John Lennox, sadly no relation, an Oxford mathematician, people like Wim Vandermeer, a physician, and Phil Farrell, an engineer, both of whom were tasked by their government to help find ways of preserving human life. I think of a friend of mine, Julie Leonard. I think of Wilson Greatbatch, the inventor of the pacemaker. Each of these individuals, and I could mention many more, were committed Christians who were also outstanding scientists. And it isn't just in the old days that we hear that. Even today, in 1916, they did a survey. Researchers asked biologists, physicists, and mathematicians whether they believed in God, in a God, rather, who actively communicates with humankind and to whom one may pray in expectation of receiving an answer. The percentage of those who answered yes, there was a belief in such a God, in 1916 was 40%. 80 years later, 1997, the same survey is repeated verbatim with very nearly the same percentage answering yes. So if there's no evidence for this myth, why does it persist? Well, to be honest, there have been quarrels between science and religion, but that's what brothers do. They fight. I can remember some knockdown, drag-out fights with my brother. There may or may not have been an umbrella bent in the fight, and I always knew when my brother stuck his tongue out between his teeth, it was time to sue for peace. This is what brothers do. They fight. And so there are examples in history of where science and religion have quarreled. The classic one is that of Galileo. But never lose sight of the fact that Galileo was a Christian when he entered into his scientific discoveries and remained a Christian all the way till his death. Yes, the church did condemn his teachings and has subsequently apologized. But even in Galileo's life, there were powerful church leaders who were advocating for him. This was not a battle between science and religion. It was a quarrel between brothers. I think there's a second reason why this myth persists, and that is that there are some Christians who are anti-science. They're anti-vaxxers or they're flat earthers. Yes, there are some Christians who take these anti-science positions, but then there are also some who take these positions who are not Christians, which leads me to suspect that it really isn't a Christian motivation that brings a person to these anti-scientific conclusions, but something else. And yes, there are some Christians who appear to be anti-science. But if you investigate further, they're not opposed to science. They're opposed to certain scientific conclusions. In other words, their opposition is based not on an opposition to the scientific method, but to the conclusions drawn from certain approaches using the scientific method. But I think this is how science is supposed to work. Contradictory hypotheses, tested using experimentation. And so what we have is not one party that's anti-science and one party that's pro-science, but two parties that are pro-science trying to figure out what the science actually is. It disproves the myth rather than proves it. I think there's another reason why this myth of science versus faith persists, and that is because it's useful to certain people. They like the idea of promoting this because it allows their secular point of view to persist. And there's still another reason, and that is because underlying this first myth of science versus faith, there is a second myth, and that is faith versus reason. As if you have to choose reason or faith. Listen to the way Richard Dawkins put it. Faith, he said, is the great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think and evaluate evidence. Faith is belief in spite of, even perhaps because of, the lack of evidence. Dawkins continues, faith, being belief that isn't based on evidence, is the principal vice of every religion. Clearly what Dawkins is saying there is that you have to choose. You have to choose between faith or reason. It was put a little bit more powerfully, I think, by the Godless Mama blogger, who said it this way: the truth claims of religion are so manifestly preposterous in light of what humanity now knows about the universe that linguistic sleight of hand is required to ensnare the innocent and hold on to the indoctrinated. Christians, she says, in other words, are dumb. Now, this isn't a new criticism. All the way back in 200 AD, someone carved into stone graffiti, which the caption read, Alex Anonymous worshiping his God. And the picture was a man hanging on a cross with the head of a donkey. This is the earliest representation we have, pictorial representation we have of Jesus Christ, but it's clearly ridiculing a Christian for what he believes. Christians are dumb. But you can even go back another 200 years before that, and you can hear the Apostle Paul say that the preaching of the cross is foolishness. So this is not a new criticism that Christians are dumb, that faith cannot coexist with reason. But I do find it an incredibly arrogant myth, and those who promote it are incredibly arrogant in what they say. Essentially what they're saying is you cannot be intelligent and have a Christian faith. In the face of individuals like Augustine and Aquinas and Calvin and Wesley and Polkinghorne and Collins and many, many other highly intelligent people, this myth just dismisses them, I would say unreasonably so. But it also ignores the ubiquity of faith. Everyone believes. Even Richard Dawkins, in writing what he wrote for that article, he had to have faith. He had to believe in the workings of his computer. He had to believe that the editor would print what he had sent him. He had to believe that the readers would read what he wrote with a fair mind. He was exercising faith. It takes a tremendous amount of faith to be an atheist. An atheist has to believe that everything you see, even the brilliant human minds that you see all around you, the powerful accomplishments of human beings in this world, are all a matter of chance. The atheist has to have faith to believe in the possibility of societal and personal advancement, even while denying the possibility of a transcendent perspective. All great human accomplishments have happened because someone had a transcendental perspective. They saw something bigger than themselves, some great goal worth striving for. The atheist believes that you can do away with that transcendental perspective and still have people strive for advancement. The atheist has to have faith to believe that the only path to truth is empirical verifiability. The atheist has to believe that atheism can create superior values than those that have been produced by 4,000 years of the Judeo-Christian tradition. The atheist has to believe in the possibility of progress, even when they know that everything in the universe is winding down. I confess, I just don't have enough faith to be an atheist. But in fact, faith and reason are not contradictory. They're highly compatible. Reason provides reasons for the faith. Dawkins is wrong when he says that faith is belief in spite of the evidence. Reasons provide the reason for our faith. After the resurrection, the Gospels tell us that Jesus appeared to his disciples on multiple occasions. On one of those occasions, Thomas showed up. Thomas, who's well known for his doubting. And he sees Jesus. And what does Jesus say to him? Thomas, believe in me in spite of the evidence. No, he says, stick your hand in my side. Touch the wounds. It's the evidence to confirm the faith. Reason provides the reasons to believe, and faith keeps reason reasonable. Emotion, reason, and faith are walking through the woods one dark, moonless night. Emotion begins to get nervous, thinking he hears sounds in the brush, which makes reason begin to see things, see shadows moving in the dark. But it's faith who reminds them both that they've been down this path many times before, therefore there's nothing to worry about. Faith, reason, and emotion go swimming. Reason knows full well that the human body can float, but he gets into the water and emotion begins to panic, thinking he'll drown, which makes reason believe that in fact he is going to drown. It's faith that reminds them of what they know to be true, that you can float. You see your wife talking to someone, another man, an emotion, that emotion of jealousy, begins to cause you to suspect that something's going on here. And sure enough, your reason begins to think of all those things that have happened in the preceding weeks. And it begins to see a sinister side to those interactions with your wife. But it's faith who reminds you at that moment that your wife has been the model of faithfulness and you don't have anything to worry about. Faith keeps reason reasonable. Furthermore, faith expands reason. It's almost like reason only has security clearance to go so far into the building, but faith has clearance to go further. And it's faith that takes reason along with it into places that reason couldn't go on its own. Let me explain what I mean using an illustration provided by C.S. Lewis. Here's what he writes. One who contended that a poem was nothing but black marks on white paper would be unanswerable if he addressed an audience who couldn't read. Look at it through microscopes, analyze the printer's ink and the paper, study it in that way as long as you like. You will never find something over and above the products of analysis, whereof you can say this is the poem. Those who can read, however, will continue to say the poem exists. This is what faith does. It allows us access into those things that cannot be empirically verified, but which we know are true. So I would say this myth of faith versus reason flourishes among those who are being patently unreasonable. They deny there's such a thing as an intelligent believer. They deny their own use of faith. They deny the clear compatibility of faith and reason, and they deny the possibility of something just because they can't empirically prove it. It's a myth. Here's the third myth, that faith is harmful. Faith is harmful. Now, I have to admit, Christians and other religions have caused harm. The trophy examples, if you're here in Canada, are residential schools. And if you're anywhere, they're the crusades that took place in the Middle Ages. I don't want to minimize the harm that was done through those injustices. It's said that perhaps as many as 9 million may have died in the crusades. Somewhere between 1 and 9 million is the count that I've seen. That's a lot of people. It includes all the combatants, all the civilians, everyone who was involved in that 9 million. And that's a lot of people. And so harm has been committed and apologies have been made. But not as many things is Christianity guilty of than it's charged with. Take, for example, colonization. This is a standard part of the myth that's trotted out to say how damaging Christianity is. You have missionaries going into colonial countries and spreading Christianity and the harm that this causes. In fact, you need to read Robert Woodbury and his study. It's the missionaries and their influence who have contributed significantly to the country's future success. So far from doing harm, those missionaries have done tremendous good to the countries that they traveled to. So yes, Christianity and other religions have caused harm, but not as much as they're being accused of, and certainly not as much as atheism. Stalin killed millions. Mao and his godless communism, as many as perhaps 45 million people died because of Chairman Mao. It's said that communism in 100 years killed 100 million people. And this doesn't even count the 50 million babies who are killed every year worldwide. So if we're talking about who's doing harm, Christianity has done its share and has apologized for it. But let's be clear on what is the most dangerous viewpoint, and that would be godless secularism. No question. But Christianity, on the other hand, has been very helpful, whether you're talking about healthcare, education, social improvements such as abolitionism and women's rights. It has been Christianity that's been at the forefront of those social improvements. Even things like democracy, the rule of law, human rights, human dignity, reasoned discourse, those are all things to which Christianity has contributed in significant ways. And reasoned discourse is what produces tolerance. It's only when two people can talk honestly and openly and candidly to one another that tolerance can take place. But I can hear somebody say right now, oh, there you are talking tolerance, when the church is the most intolerant place. It's treated LGBTQ people intolerantly. How do you answer that? Here's what I would say. Yes, Christianity does draw the line at certain behaviors. It does believe that certain behaviors are not in accord with God's plan. Where do you draw the line? You do draw the line, don't you? You do believe that some things are wrong, don't you? Because at the point at which you draw the line, you become intolerant. So it's not a question of one group being tolerant and the other being intolerant. It's a question of at what point do we become intolerant? So there's really no truth to say that faith in and of itself is harmful, though Christians have done harm and continue to do harm. It's not faith that makes them harmful. It's when they act out of character of their faith that they become harmful. The same can't be said for secularism. And here's the fourth myth. That doubt is the opposite of faith. Doubt is the opposite of faith. That's a myth. You think to yourself, I have doubts about the faith. I have doubts about Christianity. Therefore, I can't be a believer. And I say that's a myth. Doubt is inevitable. One theologian said doubt isn't the opposite of faith, it's an element of faith. Another theologian said doubt is just the shadow cast by faith. In other words, if you have faith, you will also have doubts. There's no way you can eliminate all your doubts. There's no way you can answer all the questions that you're going to have. So doubt is not the opposite of faith. Doubt is an inevitable part of believing. You say, what do I do with my doubts? Well, my answer would be first, keep doubting. The problem is not that you're doubting. The problem is that you're not doubting enough. You need to be doubting your doubts and doubting the doubter. In other words, doubt your capacity to completely understand something. The problem with skeptics is not that they doubt, it's that they don't doubt enough. They don't doubt their doubts. They don't doubt their sources. They don't doubt themselves. These myths continue to perpetuate themselves because you're not paying close enough attention to what these myths are actually saying. And so you need to keep doubting. You need to keep investigating. You need to keep pursuing the truth, because if you're in pursuit of the truth, you are drawing closer to God, not further from Him. So what I would say if you're doubting, keep doubting. I would say, secondly, exercise your faith. C.S. Lewis said that those who lose their faith do not have it wrenched away by force of argument. They just forget where they've put it. We are most in danger of losing our faith when we forget where we put it. The surest way to preserve your faith in Christ is to use it every day, to know exactly where it is when you need it. So to maintain your faith in God, maintain your relationship with God. Make it a daily relationship. So first, keep doubting. Second, exercise your faith. Third, have courage. The opposite of faith is not doubt, it's fear. You know what you need to do, but you're afraid to step out of the boat. You're afraid of what people will say. You're afraid of what your professor will say. You're afraid of missing out on the good life, or you're afraid of not being in control. And so I would say, have courage. Have the courage of your convictions. Don't let fear rob you of your faith. Doubt is not the opposite of faith. Pride is the opposite of faith. You have more to fear from your pride than you do from your doubts. You have more to fear from the refusal to bend your knee and yield your will to God. Pride is the opposite of faith, not doubt. And so I would say humble yourself. Keep doubting. Exercise your faith. Have courage. Humble yourself. Bend the knee. Doubt is not the opposite of faith. Myths are powerful things. They have a way of shaping our assumptions, but they need to be carefully examined. You need honest reason more than ever. Faith is also a powerful thing. You need more of it, not less. Not in place of reason, not to replace your mind, but to take you to places where reason can't take you. To believe that God has the authority over your life and allow you to realize your full human potential. Let me pray for you. Father, I thank you for the truth that you give to us in Jesus Christ, and the fact that you have established that truth through the ages, the fact that there are centuries, millennia of those who will testify with their very lives that you are telling the truth in what you write in your word. And I pray for those who are listening and ask, Father, that you would help them to think carefully, to not to settle for these myths, these false truths, these half-truths, but to investigate carefully, to use the mind that you've given to them. Father, I pray that they would not give up out of fear, but that they would have the courage to believe in what you're calling them to do. And Father, I pray that they would bend the knee, that they would yield to you and allow you to be the Lord of their lives so that they can be all that you've created them to be. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.